we all got something out of that, okay? He knows each and every one of your names. Join me in the prayer of illumination. Almighty God, your Son, our Savior Jesus Christ, is the light of the world. May your people, illuminated by your word, shine with the radiance of his glory, and may be known, worshipped, and obeyed to the ends of the earth. Amen. I'll turn it over to Pastor Ron. They don't run around on you.
Bless your heart, Donna. She does a great job, as you all can see and know. On the way here this morning, believe it or not, I see the guy out in the field working ground. The chisel, I don't know what these anymore. I've got so far away from farming, I don't know what some of these equipments are, but anyway, it looked to me like it was a chisel plow or something like that. But he was going right through the field and it looked great. In January, can you believe it? It's just amazing. I remember talking about farming. I remember one year, I don't know what year it was, I was telling Doug that a while ago, I worked in the field every month of the year, almost every week. It was just amazing. The whole winter was just and I had, I sowed oats. They don't do that anymore, I guess, but back then we did it sometimes. Sowed oats in February, and it was just, the ground was absolutely beautiful. So this is not, unheard of, but it certainly is nice, and we need to enjoy it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with Donna's story, but first of all, I want to make something clear here. The sacred power of the listening heart. I know in your bulletin it says the sacred heart. Well, that's my fault. Well, it's actually Carol's fault, but I'm going to take it on that. But I want to emphasize that. The title is the sacred power of the listening heart. Listening is the key word here, okay? Because that's what this story was about, actually. 1 Samuel 3, 1 through 10 and 19. Now the voice Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. And Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel, and he said, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call you. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call you, my son, but will lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again, a third time. And he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his space. Now the Lord came and stood there calling us as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Then the Lord said to Samuel, "Here I am, for I have nothing to do in Israel will make both ears and anyone who hear of it tingle." One more thing, I want to go to 19 now. I know I skipped over 1. 19, as Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him and let none of his words fall to the ground. Sorry about that. Listening. Over 80 years ago, Jed Harris was a successful producer of plays. One of his most successful works was the production of Thornton Wilder's play, Our Town. Some of you, that rings a bell with some of you, Our Town. In the middle of a lengthy season mixed with intense pressure of many details, Harris began to lose his sense of hearing. He couldn't even hear what other people so close to him were saying, and so he was missing crucial details during conversations. As a result, Jed Harris decided to pay a visit to his renowned audiologist, who listened attentively to the producer as he told him about his declining ability to hear. After a thorough examination of Harris's ears, the hearing specialist took out from his vest an expensive gold coated pocket watch, and he placed it against the producer's ear. He said, "Do you hear this watch ticking?" Audiologist asked. "Absolutely," the producer responded. This guy, I'm not going to say audiologist again because I can already say it the first time, okay? So I'm going to skip over it. You know what it is. Moved farther away and held the watch up to his office door. Harris focused and remarked, "Yeah, I can hear it." The physician then walked back to the next room and asked, "How about now?" "It's still clearer," Harris replied. The spacer walked back into his office, returned the watch to his vest, and he said, "This phenomenon is quite commonplace, especially among successful individuals. Your hearing is excellent, Mr. Harris. You simply quit listening." You know anyone like that? They just don't listen. They don't have a hearing problem. They just really don't listen. I see some wives poking their husbands and say, "That's you, you know." Obviously, some people do have hearing problems. That happens, of course, especially later on in life, but not nearly as often as people miss messages simply because they don't listen to one another. Robert Holden, in his book Happiness Is Now, tells about a husband and wife, listen to this, both in their 70s, who decided after 55 years of marriage to divorce. When her counselor asked him why, the wife had a long list. "He never asked if I'm happy," said the wife. Husband said, I assumed you were. He never says he loves me," said the wife. "Well, I thought you knew I loved you," said the husband. The wife continued, "He never says I'm beautiful." The husband replied, "Well, I look at you every day and admire your beauty." "We rarely talk," said the wife. "I know you like to read a lot," said the husband. "I read because we don't talk," said the wife. There was a pause, and he said, "And we never go out," said the wife. "I thought you like to stay in," said the husband. "I only stay in because I'm waiting to go out," said the wife. The counselor continued to take notes, and he said, the wife said, "Well, he's mean to me." "It's in what way?" asked the counselor. "Well, at breakfast 3 times a week for 55 years, he always serves me the crust of the loaf, and I hate bread crusts." The husband was surprised. He said, "I give you the crust, my dear, because that's my favorite part." Now, I'm not sure I hear, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" Anyway, what we have here, says a popular movie line, is a failure to communicate. Communication is vital to successful living. Women seem to be more conscious of that than men, and I'm not surprised at that at all. One national magazine polled over 30,000 women, and only one problem ranked above conflicts over money, and it was, guess what? Poor communication. Researcher Terry Schultz writes, although many women choose their partners based on sex appeal, I wonder what in the world Carol couldn't have been that. And don't you guys laugh. I see a lot of you guys out there too. I wonder what. Anyway, research shows that if we had to do it again, they said the ability to communicate is much more important. Communication. There's a beautiful story in the Bible about someone who spent a lifetime listening. In his case, though, he was listening to God. Oh, of all people. It begins in the 2nd chapter of the 1st Samuel with a touching scene of a holy woman named Hannah pleading with God to allow her to bear a son because she was barren. I hope you read it sometime. It's a great story. Hannah made a vow to God that if he would allow her to bear a son, she would give the boy to the service of God all the days of his life. Some time passed, and God finally answered Hannah's prayer. She conceived and bore a son, calling his name Samuel, saying, "Because I have asked for him from the Lord." Now Hannah followed through on her promises to give Samuel to God. As soon as he was of age, Samuel was placed under the care and the training of an old priest named Eli. Don already mentioned that. Eli was gradually losing his vision, but he was faithful in his teaching of young Samuel. He was also gave Samuel light duties around the tabernacle, so he treated him well. One night when Samuel was about 11 years old, he had a life-changing experience. Now, this is a scripture that I read to you a while ago, but I'm going to go through it again, just briefly. He was lying down in the house of the Lord trying to go to sleep. But he heard a voice in the night, and he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Eli said, "I didn't call you, go back and lay down." Again, the voice called Samuel. Once again, Samuel got up, went to Eli and said, "Here I am, Lord, you called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call you, go back and lay down." Now, Samuel had been studying about God, but he did not yet know God. Now, I want to stop here. This is a key in this, I believe, and it's interesting. But he did not yet know God. He had been studying about God, but he did not yet know God. I'm afraid that there are many people, even in the church, many adults even, who have studied about God, know a lot about God in the scriptures, but don't really know God, not on a personal basis. And it may very be because they don't listen. So a third time this voice in the night called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then the scriptures say Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel says, "Speak, for your servant is listening." I mean, it's a beautiful story about the call of one of Israel's greatest prophets. God spoke, Samuel listened. Now, 19th verse. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. In other words, Samuel, who listened to God, had a lifelong relationship with God and had a powerful ministry. So today we want to spend a few moments dealing with the sacred power of a listening heart. All of that is built up into this heading, listening heart. Wonderful things happen sometimes when we're willing to listen. Are you listening? The first thing we need to note is that listening is not the same thing as hearing. Hearing refers to the sounds that enter the ears. It's a physical process that, provided you don't have any hearing problems, happens automatically. Listening, however, requires more than that, and it requires focus and concentrated effort. And the older you get, the harder it is. Trust me. Listen. It takes effort. An 80-year-old grandfather went to his daughter's house for Sunday dinner. When the meal was over, he announced that he was going to take a walk through the neighborhood. "I'll be back in about 20 minutes, he said. 2 hours later, before he finally returned. "Sorry I'm late," he said, "but I stopped to talk to an old friend, and he just wouldn't stop listening." Now, I like that, folks. Some people will not stop talking, but blessed are the person who will not stop listening. It's a wonderful gift to give to someone to listen to them intently. In fact, folks, I believe the greatest honor you can pay someone is to really listen to them. As David Augsburger once said, "An open ear is the only believable sign of an open heart," when we listen. Listening requires intent. It requires focus. One common problem is that instead of listening closely to what someone is saying, we often get distracted after a sentence or two and instead start thinking about what we're going to say when we get a chance. This means that we don't really listen to the rest of what the other person is saying at all. Listening to someone is a way of saying, "You're important to me. You matter." Author and radio teacher Chuck Swindoll once found himself with too many commitments in too few days, which I understand perfectly. In his book, Stress Fractures, he tells about getting nervous and tense about it. He said, "I was snapping at my wife and our children, choking down my food at meal times in a hurry, feeling irritated at those unexpected interruptions through the day. And before long, staying around our house started reflecting the pattern of my hurry-up style, and it was becoming unbearable." Anybody been there? "I distinctly remember after supper one evening the words of my younger daughter, Colleen. She wanted to tell me something important that had happened to her at the school that day. She began hurriedly, 'Daddy, I want to tell you something, and I'll tell you really fast.' Suddenly realizing her frustration, Swindoll answered, honey, you can tell me, and you don't have to tell me really fast. Say it slowly. He said, I never forget her answer. She said, then listen slowly. What she wanted to know is if her daddy really cared enough about her to listen to her. That's what many people hunger for today, especially. When we listen to them, really listen, we are saying, you matter to me. You're important to me. You matter. Of course, the most important listening we can do is we listen to God. I believe, folks, with all my heart, that it's God's deepest wish to direct his children toward a positive, fulfilling life. Most of us never listen. And as a result, we miss out on some of life's greatest joys. Listen. Final story. Nancy Ortberg tells of going out to dinner with a man named Doug Cole in Washington, D.C. years ago. Doug told her about a 30-year-old insurance executive he had met at a party. Doug learned that this young man, his name was Bob, was a new Christian. Intrigued, he asked how things were going. Have you found a church? He asked. Yes, Bob said, I found a church. I'm happy. Have you found a Bible study? Yes, I have one of those too. Finally, Doug asked, how about your relationship with God in prayer? Bob didn't know much about that. He said, I don't know. So Doug laid out a challenge for him. He said, pick something to pray over every day for the next 6 months. The prayers can be elaborate or simple. They can be structured or free form. Listening to or speaking to God, whatever, it doesn't matter. But Bob must pray at least briefly every day. If at the end of 6 months God has not done something truly significant, Doug told him, I will then pay you $500. Nancy told Doug, he said, that doesn't sound very biblical to me. No. He said, but I do it all the time. Bob accepted the challenge, but didn't know what to pray for. Now, Bob and his wife lived in D.C., and the city's international flavor there, they decided to choose a different land to pray for every day. Not an individual, pray for a land, a country. So along those lines, Bob decided to pray daily for Kenya. Lord's Prayer for Kenya. Not much happened for 4 or 5 months. The prayer experiment was yielding little. Then one night he sat next to a woman at a dinner party. You want to guess where she was from? Kenya. She ran an orphanage in Kenya. Bob related that he felt as though ice water was suddenly running through his veins. He had been fantasizing about how to spend that $500 Doug had promised him, but suddenly he had a strong image of a wad 500 sprouting wings and flying away. He asked for details about the orphanage and listened to her answers for a full, intense hour. She told Bob that no one had ever shown that kind of interest, and would he consider flying to Kenya to see it at first hand. Now, to make a long story short, Bob ended up providing for the care of those Kenyan children and seeing to the supplying of that orphanage. That's not all the story. He made such a splash that the president of Kenya invited him to his palace. There, Bob advocated for prisoners of the conscience in that country, and later those prisoners were released. I'm not done yet. The U.S. Secretary of State called Bob and asked him how in the world he did it. The United States government had been unsuccessfully seeking their freedom for a long time. All because of prayer. What I'm trying to say to you this morning, folks, is that there are some very special people in the world. They're the luckiest people alive. I believe that they're the Andrew people. They're the enthusiastic, joyful people. They're characterized primarily by 2 attributes. They have faith, a positive expectation about what God is doing in their lives, and they have love. and they care, and they listen, and they have received what they have received, they're willing to pass on to others. Now, I know some people like that, folks. Some of them are right here in this church. God bless you. God bless you. Hymn number 595. Please stand with me.